Welcome to Messages from the Universe with Laurie Wondra. Laurie is an internationally renowned psychic medium, author, and shamanic practitioner, sharing insights from angels, guides, wisdom keepers, and teachers of the universe that help you navigate life's mysteries and transformations.
Welcome to Messages from the Universe. I'm Laurie Wondra, and today we're exploring a subject that has become increasingly important in our spiritual communities: what it truly means to become spiritually mature, looking at what's beyond love and light. Many of us begin our spiritual journey searching for peace. We seek healing and answers and connection and a greater understanding of who we are. I always say that's evolution, is really knowing and digging deep and understanding who are we. But along the way, we discover beautiful teachings about love and light and how to raise our vibration. We discover what vibration is, what is manifestation, what is truly using your intuition, angels and guides, and the limitless possibilities of working in the fields of spirit. Now, these teachings often become the doorway that awakens us to a much larger reality. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, I believe it is where many of us are meant to begin. But eventually, our spiritual journey asks something more of us. We seek more, want more. It asks us to move beyond simply collecting spiritual experiences and begin embodying the spiritual wisdom. We stop having the urge of collecting education and certifications and classes and learnings. Spiritual maturity isn't measured by how many books you've read, nor how many certifications you've earned, or how many intuitive gifts you've developed. It isn't determined by how many crystals you own, how many retreats you've attended, or how many times you've meditated. But it is measured by how you live. Can you remain compassionate when someone disagrees with you? Can you love another person without needing to change them? Can you admit when you've made a mistake? Can you remain grounded when life becomes uncertain? Can you stand in your truth without requiring everyone else to validate it? Can you just let those around you be who they are? These questions reveal far more about our spiritual growth than any mystical experience ever could. There comes a point where our paths shift. We stop chasing experiences and begin allowing those experiences to transform us. We discover that spirituality isn't something we practice for just an hour a day. It becomes the way we think, the way we speak, the way we treat others, and the way we meet life's greatest challenges. That, to me, is spiritual maturity. Let's break this up into parts. The part one being the early spiritual journey. Nearly every spiritual path begins with some sort of awakening. For some people, it comes through a difficult life event. For others, it arrives after a loss of someone they love, maybe a health crisis, an unexpected spiritual experience, or simply a deep feeling that there is more, and there must be more to life, than what they have seen with their physical eyes. Suddenly, a whole new world begins to open. Maybe you've discovered meditation. Maybe you've discovered energy healing, or angels and guides. Maybe you've suddenly been drawn to crystals and sacred geometry, astrology or numerology. Synchronicities that seem far too meaningful to just be called coincidence. Perhaps mediumship, channeling, or intuitive development begins to unfold in your life. Maybe you become fascinated with manifestation and the incredible realization that your thoughts, your emotions, and your beliefs influence your experience of your reality. Everything might feel suddenly magical. Every repeating number catches your attention. Every meaningful coincidence feels like a message from the universe. Every meditation reveals perhaps another layer of yourself that you never knew existed, or you never allowed yourself to go there. It is exciting. It's also inspiring and deeply validating. You begin to realize that life is far more mysterious. It's far more interconnected, and it's expansive, more than you have ever imagined. This stage is beautiful, but it's necessary. It's often that doorway that awakens us to the reality that Spirit has been speaking to us all along. It's really not just suddenly, but it's suddenly we are aware. It's been there all along. And it's eventually something interesting begins to happen. Something catches our attention. We start paying attention. Now, many people unknowingly become attached to being spiritual rather than allowing themselves to be transformed by spirituality. There's a profound difference. Being spiritual can become part of our identity. Transformation changes our character. One is something we talk about. The other becomes something we live. Real spiritual growth eventually asks us to move beyond collecting knowledge and begin embodying that wisdom. It invites us to become less interested in appearing awakened and more committed to becoming kind, humble, courageous, discerning, and authentic. This is where the journey truly begins. And that leads us into part 2, spiritual bypassing. And when the light becomes a place maybe to hide. As we continue our exploration of spiritual maturity, I'd like to introduce a concept that has become more widely discussed over the past several years, and that's spiritual bypassing. It's an interesting phrase, and personally, I never really cared for it. Sometimes it can sound judgmental or even dismissive. That isn't my intention. In fact, I believe every one of us has spiritually bypassed something at one time or another. It isn't a sign that we're failing on our spiritual journey. It's simply a sign that we're human. But spiritual bypassing simply means using spiritual beliefs, practices, or language to avoid facing the work, avoid facing emotions, experiences, or truths that feel uncomfortable. Most of the time, it isn't intentional. We're humans. We aren't trying to deceive anyone. More often, we're trying to protect ourselves from pain. And when we first awaken spiritually, we discover incredible teachings that inspire us. They inspire hope. And we learn about raising our vibration and manifesting our reality and surrendering to divine timing, forgiveness and gratitude and unconditional love and the power of positive intention. Now, these teachings are beautiful and they have transformed countless lives, including my own. But every teaching can be misunderstood when taken to an extreme. Sometimes we begin to believe that being spiritual means we should never feel sadness, never feel anger or grief or disappointment or fear or uncertainty. We may even begin judging ourselves whenever these emotions do arise. But these are emotions that are part of our compass system that help us navigate the experiences that we have. Have you ever heard someone say, I only focus on positive energy, or I don't allow negative into my life, or I'm choosing love, or I'm just sending light? Those statements may come from a deeply authentic place, or they may also come from a way of avoiding something that still needs healing. And the difference isn't found in the words, it's found in the heart. Imagine someone loses a parent that they deeply love. They're deeply connected. And a friend immediately says, well, everything happens for a reason. No, that statement may eventually become meaningful, but perhaps not on the day of the funeral. Sometimes the greatest act of love is not explaining someone's pain. It's just sitting beside them while they experience it. It's not trying to fix something that isn't necessarily broke. There's wisdom in silence. There's healing in just being present. Spirit doesn't ask us nor require us to fix another person's suffering. Sometimes Spirit simply asks us just to witness it with compassion, just hold space. I often think about nature when considering this. Nature never apologizes. Nature never apologizes for winter. It doesn't pretend autumn isn't happening. Trees don't cling desperately to every leaf because they believe shedding them is negative. They release what's complete. Winter doesn't deny that life exists. It creates the conditions for new life to emerge. And likewise, our emotional seasons all have purpose. Joy teaches us celebration, and grief teaches us love. Anger can reveal injustice or violated boundaries, and fear often points towards something we believe needs protection. Disappointment asks us to release expectations, and uncertainty invites trust. Every single emotion carries information. Problems arise when emotions become our permanent identity, but they're equally problematic when we refuse to acknowledge they even exist. One of the greatest misconceptions in modern spirituality is the belief that high vibration means constant happiness. I don't believe that's true. Some of the highest frequency people I've ever met have cried deeply. They've grieved tremendous losses. They experience heartbreak, down days. They've questioned God. They've doubted themselves. They've felt exhausted. What made them spiritually mature wasn't the absence of difficult emotions. It was their willingness to experience those emotions without allowing bitterness to define them. There is an enormous difference. Jesus wept. The Buddha experienced suffering before enlightenment. Many of the world's great mystics wrote openly about periods of darkness, uncertainty, and profound questioning. The journey has never been about avoiding our humanity. It's always been about bringing greater consciousness into it. And sometimes we tell ourselves, I'm over it, but our body quietly disagrees. Our shoulders tighten, our stomach aches, our sleep becomes restless. We become reactive in situations that seem unrelated. Someone's innocent comment triggers a disproportionate response. Why? Because unprocessed experiences often remain stored within us until we're ready to acknowledge them. Our minds can create spiritual explanations. Our nervous system still remembers the wound. Healing begins when the two finally come together and meet. Another area where spiritual bypassing often appears is forgiveness. Forgiveness is one of the most misunderstood concepts in spirituality. Many people believe forgiving someone means pretending nothing happened. Well, it doesn't. Some believe forgiveness requires reconciliation. I don't believe it does. Others believe forgiveness means trusting someone again. I don't believe that's true either. Forgiveness releases the emotional burden we continue carrying. Reconciliation requires two willing participants. Trust is rebuilt through consistent action. And those are entirely different processes. Imagine someone repeatedly lying to you. You may genuinely forgive them. You may sincerely wish them well. You may even pray for their happiness. But that does not require inviting them back into the same position of trust. Compassion without discernment becomes self-abandonment. Healthy spirituality allows both forgiveness and the boundaries to exist together. In fact, boundaries are one of the greatest expressions of self-respect. Many caring people struggle with this. They believe saying no somehow makes them unloving. Yet, every healthy relationship depends upon clear boundaries. Think of a river. A river only has direction because of its banks. Those are its boundaries. And without boundaries, it becomes a flood. Without structure, it loses its purpose. So our personal boundaries work the same way. They create clarity. They allow love to move in healthy ways. Another example appears whenever conflict arises. Now, many spiritually minded people dislike conflict. I think most humans dislike conflict. But I've seen people avoid difficult conversations because they just want peace. But avoiding conflict isn't creating peace. Sometimes it's preserving discomfort. Peace built upon silence often becomes resentment. Authentic peace grows from honesty delivered with kindness. That conversation you may have been avoiding, that truth you've been maybe afraid to speak, that relationship that requires some healthy change. Those may actually be invitations from your soul or from beyond. Not every uncomfortable conversation lowers your vibration. Sometimes it does raise it because authenticity carries tremendous energy. Another subtle form of bypassing occurs when we attribute everything to karma, soul contracts, or divine timing. These perspectives can offer incredible comfort, but they can also become ways of avoiding responsibility. Suppose someone repeatedly ignores their health. They eat poorly, they never rest, they live under chronic stress. Then they simply say, "That must be my soul contract." Well, perhaps, or perhaps the soul contract included learning how to care for the body. Sometimes divine guidance doesn't remove responsibility, it increases it. Likewise, manifestation can become misunderstood. We sometimes hear that every experience is something we've consciously attracted. While our beliefs certainly influence our lives, this idea can unintentionally create shame. Imagine telling someone experiencing profound grief or trauma that they manifested it. How heavy that burden becomes. Life is more mysterious than simple formulas. Sometimes we create, sometimes we choose, sometimes we learn, sometimes life simply unfolds in ways beyond our present understanding. Humility allows us to say, "I don't know." And that is one of the most powerful, spiritually mature statements we can make. I say that quite frequently. I don't know, but I'll see if I can figure it out. And I still might not know. As our journey deepens, something beautiful begins to change. We stop asking, "How do I avoid suffering?" Instead, we don't view life as suffering, but events that create both opportunities and challenges. And then we can ask the question, how do I move through this situation with more wisdom? We stop asking, how do I stay positive all the time? Instead, we understand that our emotions are normal in going for feelings that are from sadness and angry to ecstatic and joyful and happiness. Understanding that, so then you can ask the question, because I want to, how do I remain loving without denying my truth? We stop asking, how do I escape difficult emotions? Instead, we stop disappearing from what life provides us as our experiences, and rather than hide, we ask, what are these emotions trying to teach me? We become curious to the experiences. That shift changes everything because emotions are not our enemies. They are messengers. Grief reminds us we have loved deeply. Anger often reveals where a boundary has been crossed. Fear asks us to pay attention, and disappointment helps us release illusions. Uncertainty teaches us faith and hope. None of these emotions are permanent. Like weather passing through the sky, they arise and then they move and they eventually pass when we allow them to complete their purpose. The spiritually mature person doesn't cling to them. Neither do they pretend they don't exist. Instead, they observe them with compassion and curiosity. They learn from them. They release them. And perhaps this is one of the greatest paradoxes of the spiritual journey. The more deeply we awaken, the more fully we become human. Not less emotional, more emotionally honest. Not less vulnerable, but more courageous. Not less compassionate, but more discerning. And not less loving, but more authentic. Love itself begins to mature. It becomes less about pleasing everyone and less about avoiding discomfort and less about appearing enlightened. Instead, it becomes grounded in truth. Love without truth can become enabling. Truth without love can become harsh. But spiritual maturity invites both to walk together. Now, the same is true with compassion. Compassion does not require us to sacrifice ourselves. Compassion includes ourselves. It allows us to care deeply while still honoring healthy limits. Acceptance doesn't mean agreement. Understanding doesn't excuse harmful behaviors, and forgiveness doesn't erase wisdom. Boundaries don't diminish love, and when all of these qualities begin working together, something remarkable happens. Our spirituality is no longer something we practice. It becomes something we embody. People will not remember your certifications, how many books you've read, or who you've studied with. They may never know how long you've meditated. They may never know your spiritual beliefs, but they will know how you make them feel. They see or feel how you show up every day. And it's not a show, but it's a way of being. They will remember whether they felt seen and heard. They will remember whether they felt respected, whether they felt safe. And perhaps that is one of the truest measures of spiritual maturity. Not that we have escaped the difficult parts of life, but that we have learned to walk through them with honesty and humility and wisdom and compassion and with an open heart. I'm Laurie Wondra, and thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to Messages from the Universe. For information about Laurie Wondra's current events or to schedule a private session, visit her website, yourlifecore.com. You can also subscribe to her monthly newsletter. Laurie also shares inspirational and informational messages on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Thanks again for listening.